annual gathering of world leaders to discuss global issues. The General Assembly sitting comes at a time when the UN chief has made a passionate plea to the world leaders in the developing countries to attend to the thorny issue of the transformation of the financial system. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is also expected to engage world leaders on a special summit of the future.
The 2030 Agenda and the Paris Agreement are at risk. Meanwhile, many African countries are mired in debt and struggling to invest in sustainable development. Many have no access to effective debt relief, enjoy scarce resources, and clearly insufficient concessional funding to respond to the basic needs of their population and protect them from the ravages of a climate crisis they did nothing to create. This situation is unsustainable and the recipe for social unrest. That is why we propose deep reforms in the outdated, ineffective, and unfair international financial system, and an SDG stimulus to provide developing countries with the liquidity they need while seeking medium and long-term solutions. Solutions such as increasing the lending capacity of multilateral development banks and enabling them to massively scale up affordable financing for development in Africa.
The President will be among the leaders who will be participating in this important summit.
The high-level general debate of the 79th session of the General Assembly, UNGA 79, is scheduled to take place at the UN headquarters in New York from the 24th to the 30th of September, and President Ramaphosa will lead South Africa's delegation, accompanied by relevant ministers, advisors, as well as senior officials. This session is the African group's turn to preside over the General Assembly and the 79th session, which will be led by Mr. Philemon Yang, former Prime Minister of Cameroon, who was elected as the president of the 79th session. As the president of the General Assembly, Mr. Yang has indicated that his chosen theme for this year's general debate will be unity in diversity for the advancement of peace, sustainable development, and human dignity for everyone, everywhere.
On his return, the President will receive the remains of former activists who died in the fight for freedom.
When the President comes back on the 28th of September, he will be back a day or so before that. He will officially receive the human remains of the liberation fighters, stalwarts who perished while in exile, fighting for the liberation and freedom of South Africa. The welcoming ceremony is scheduled to take place at the Waterkloof Air Force Base, followed by the homecoming ceremony in the form of a formal launch of the Repatriation and Restitution Program. The repatriation, headed by the interdepartmental team, is for the returning of the struggle stalwarts who died in Zambia and Zimbabwe, and is scheduled to commence in Tshwane at the end of Heritage Month on the 28th of September.
Another important engagement for the President will be his participation at the G20 in Brazil later this year.
Things are underway for South Africa's presidency of the G20, as well as the hosting of the G20. It's a massive opportunity for the country and the continent to have the opportunity to lead the G20, which South Africa will utilize to ensure that amongst other issues, the issues of the global south are prominent, the issues of the continent are prominent, and for the first time, you will have the African continent participating as part of the G20. If you'll recall, at the last G20 summit in India, Africa's membership of the G20 was adopted unanimously. And so it is an exciting opportunity for us as a country, as a continent, as well as the Global South, to ensure that all our pertinent issues that relate to economic development are surfaced and are dealt with some level of detail. The logistical arrangements and all of those other arrangements are underway. There is an interdepartmental team that's looking into that, and we will be in Brazil during different stages to learn how they've hosted, to engage our counterparts in Brazil with respect to their experience and learnings of leading the G20. And we will incorporate their inputs as well as others. A number of countries have expressed keenness in assisting us with the hosting of the G20. And so we'll be looking at how we collaborate with our partners, trade bilateral partners within the G20, to ensure that we host a successful summit.
South Africa will be hosting the G20 summit next year. Sophie Mukwena, SABC News, Johannesburg.